Hi guys, welcome back to the channel where in today's video we're going to take a look at EMR Serverless. EMR Serverless is a new offering from AWS. We're going to cover what is EMR Serverless, we're going to compare it to normal EMR, we're going to compare it to Glue, and then we're going to finish off with a tutorial where I show you how to run a Spark and a Hive application or job using EMR Serverless and EMR notebooks. I'll make all the resources for free as usual, links in the description to what you need. Really appreciate a like and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to make these videos. And with that being said, let's just jump right into it. So what is EMR Serverless? EMR Serverless is a new offering from AWS. They posted a really good video on it, so I'm going to leave a link in the description below. But I've took my points from that video and from the documentation and from a few different other places that I've been able to read up on it so far. So first, to understand what EMR Serverless is, you have to look at what EMR is. EMR is a service provided to us from AWS that lets us run big data processing in the AWS ecosystem. It's where we can go in and configure a cluster that is made up of many nodes and then install, or AWS installs for us, selected frameworks or big data frameworks such as Pig, Hive, Spark, MapReduce, Presto, that we tell it to install when we're configuring. There's plenty of videos on this channel on EMR. I advise you to go check it out if you're new to it, but if you're watching the serverless video, you probably already know what EMR is. So EMR Serverless then aims to simplify this process. According to the video from AWS on its release, customers were crying out for a way to run Hive and Spark jobs without having to configure or spin up an EMR cluster. Now, from experience, I can actually say some of the companies that I've worked with in the past, this has been a real bugbear where they want to run some simple Hive DDL, which is what we're going to do in the tutorial, but they have to spin up a whole 6-node cluster, bring in an edge node, put that the whole way through the system, build a process around that, and then spinning up the cluster might take 30 minutes and running the code might take 30 seconds. So this is where EMR Serverless comes in to simplify the process. We are no longer in control or have control over the resources, such as the type of nodes that we're using, nor do we install the big data framework. This is a way we can run Hive and Spark jobs on demand without having to configure a server. So when we compare EMR Serverless to EMR, the big difference is that we are no longer provisioning the resources in the console or telling it what resources to provision. And we can only run Spark and Hive jobs presently. So if you've Pig jobs or old style MapReduce jobs, then you're still going to have to use EMR for now. And then the big differences for me, aside from the frameworks, is that you no longer have control over the instance types and what kind of memory or CPU you're using. So if you're running those big ML jobs that sometimes data scientists get carried away with and you need control over the underlying infrastructure, then you can't use EMR Serverless. EMR Serverless is solving the problem that you don't have to look after the infrastructure anymore and you just want to run a Spark job. So if you're running something complicated where you need control of the infrastructure, then you're still going to have to use EMR. Okay, so with that being said, what's then the difference between EMR Serverless and Glue? This is another question that I get asked quite a lot. So EMR Serverless can run Spark jobs, Glue can run Spark jobs. The main difference for me so far having used the two is that Glue is very much the one-stop ETL shop. It has everything you need for ETL, from an IDE effectively where you can code in the cloud, Glue Studio where you can do a bit of drop and drag, it has a scheduler built in, workflows sit there, and even has things where the jobs fail and you can go into that level of code that you want to see fail in the logs. EMR Serverless doesn't really have those features. It doesn't have a scheduler. It doesn't have an IDE effectively where you can code. It doesn't have something like Glue Studio that's a big one-stop shop for ETL. It's very much a place that you can just send pre-existing Spark jobs at to run. And as I mentioned before, the video that you can see below in the description, they really do describe it as there to fit the use case where a customer is spinning up an EMR cluster, but really they don't really want to look after the resources or need that granularity control over the resources, and they just want to run a Spark job. Okay, so that's the kind of theory at a high level. As I said, links in the description for more. What we really want to do is get hands-on and actually see this thing in action. So let's jump onto the console where we can actually start running some EMR Serverless jobs or applications using EMR Studio. Okay guys, we're going to do a bit of the setup work first. So the first thing to do is navigate to the GitHub repo with the link in the description below. We're going to just download this as always as a file. So if you go code and then download as zip, that'll place it into your downloads. double click to unzip that file. So the folder unzipped in my downloads has everything we need. It's also referenced obviously throughout on the GitHub. So we'll kind of work between the folder that we've downloaded locally and just some of the files on GitHub, whatever is easiest as we go. For this tutorial, and the first time, I've actually created a full README that takes us through all the different steps that we're going to do. It took quite a while, but there's screenshots that you can follow along with. I'm going to show you exactly how to do all this in the video, so there's no need to kind of read it in detail. But if you want a reference guide, it's all there as well. So with that being said, the first thing to do is log into the AWS Management Console, and we'll do some setup work where we are going to create a S3 bucket, 2 IAM roles, and then a couple of folders inside that S3 bucket as well. So let's do the IAM roles first. I am going to show you the long way to do this. So if you're on your own console and it looks slightly different, then you can follow along. So type in IAM into the top. I'm going to left-hand click and open in a new tab, just so I'm always keeping this screen at home. And if you look at the README, the first thing we need to do in the setup work is create an EMR notebook role. So back into the AWS Management Console, we're in IAM, we need to go to roles, and then we want to create a role, which is over here on the right-hand side. Click create role. You want to do a custom trust policy. So right-hand click custom trust policy. And if we jump back into the GitHub and you look here, you'll see that there's actually a link in step number 1 to the JSON that we need, which is here. You've also downloaded this locally. If you copy that with a little tick on the right-hand side, go back into IAM, delete what is there and paste that in. That is everything we need for this little bit of the trust policy. Click next, and the next thing you need to do is add permissions. So looking back at the setup of the GitHub, you can see that we need 2 policies. These policies already exist in AWS, so we don't need to create them. So I'm just going to copy and paste it in, hit enter, and you hit select. And then I'm going to unfilter by clicking that X, go back, and then we need Amazon S3 full access. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in again. Amazon S3 full access, hit enter. Oh, I've got space, sorry. Control V, then back, then enter, and S3 full access. Select that and hit next. We should then see, we'll give it a name in a minute, that we have our trust policy that we added and then our 2 policies down here. That's fine. And we need to give the role a name, something that makes it easily identifiable to us. So I'm going to call this EMR notebook role. So we'll use that later. So EMR notebook role, you can call it exactly the same as me, and hit create role. It takes a little second and everything is good to go. Next thing, we need to create a second role. So again, create role. Just going to close this tab and go back onto the setup tab. Here we need to create a serverless execution role for EMR. So I am going to right-hand click and then open this link in a new tab. And again, you'll see that there is a different little trust policy here. We want to copy it again, back onto IAM, and we want to go custom trust policy. We want to delete what's there and paste in what we just copied from GitHub. Make sure it's the new one. And hit next. And then this time we need to create a policy. So I'm going to hit create policy. And then we want to go to the JSON editor. So create policy, JSON editor. Back into the setup work with GitHub. Again, going to minimize that tab because we're done. Policy for permissions is what we need. So right hand click and open, copy. And then we want to jump back into IAM, delete what is there and paste in what we have. Excellent. Go next tags. We don't want to add a tag. We want to go next review. And this time I'm going to call this EMR Serverless Execution Role. And I'm going to copy and paste this out so I have it. And then we want to create that policy. Takes a little second. Policy's been created. Back onto the left-hand tab where we were, we want to hit the refresh button. We then want to paste in what we just copied, so EMR Serverless Execution Role, and then select it. So that is what we just created on this tab. It's now available in the first tab. Click next, and we need to give the role a name. So give it something that is easy to remember. So I'm going to call this EMR serverless exe role. And we want to create that role. Creating role has been created. Excellent. So that's just done with IAM. So I'm just going to minimize down this other IAM tab and then minimize down this GitHub tab that we're not using. And then back on to the main AWS console by minimizing this one down as well. Next thing we need to do is create a EMR or a S3 bucket that EMR will use for this tutorial. So type in S3, right hand click, open in new tab. When this opens or loads, right hand side, we want to create a new bucket. And we need to give the bucket a name. I should also point out at this point that I'm working in North Virginia for everything. So if you want to follow exactly the same as me, keep your AWS account in North Virginia. Need to give this something that is unique in the entirety of AWS. So if you want to give it your name, feel free. I'm going to give it my name and call it Johnny Shivers EMR. Leave everything else as default and create the bucket. And then I'm going to go grab that bucket by typing in EMR and enter, or just click on the name and it'll work. And then we need to create some folders. So I just hit there, create folder. So I'll show you that again, create folder. First folder we need to create. And again, if you just want to be lazy and copy and paste, they're here on the GitHub. So we need scripts. So I'm going to copy and paste that one in, create the folder. We need to create another folder and this one's called customers. So I'm just going to copy and paste that one in. And then we need query results. This is an added feature that we'll do at the end. So if you don't want to create this folder, you don't want to do the very last step, that is also fine, but I'm creating it now just to have it. Okay, in the unzipped folder, there is one thing we have to do before we upload, and it's change a line here. So I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. And what we need to do is change this to the EMR bucket that we set up. So we need to change this to the EMR bucket that we just created before we upload it. So my bucket is called Johnny-Shivers EMR. So just the S3 bucket that we created before we upload the scripts into the folder. And then you want to save that. So I'm just Control-S-ing and shut it down. So make sure you change that over to the EMR bucket that we just created. Okay. Inside scripts, click in and then go upload on the right hand side. And we want to add a couple of files. So inside my downloads, which I'm just going to go on the left, inside the unzipped file or folder that we downloaded from GitHub at the start, there's two files that we need to upload. First one is this SQL statement, and the other one I need is this word count down the bottom. So word count and SQL statement. I need Hive statements.sql and word count. Open that up and upload. Just take a little second. Succeeded. Just double click into the scripts and make sure that they're there. Go up to the highest level of the bucket. Go into customers and go upload. Then we want to add files, and then there'll be a customer.csv inside that folder. So customer.csv. Open. And then hit upload. Takes a little second and it's succeeded. So if we look at the README again and the setup steps, you can see that we've created the role that we needed for the notebook. We've created the role for the serverless execution. We've created the S3 bucket, and then we've created the folders inside the S3 bucket. So next thing we're going to do is the main tutorial. We're going to do the studio setup first, and then we'll actually run a Spark job. Back on the AWS main console, you want to type in EMR at the top, and we'll actually navigate this time to EMR because we're going to be in EMR the rest of the time. What we want to do is actually go to EMR Studio on the left-hand side. So click on EMR Studio. Then what we want to do is then select this giant Get Started button in the middle. Then once loaded, we just want to create Studio on the right-hand side here. So hit Create Studio. Then give it a name. So I'm going to give it my name, Johnny Shivers EMR Serverless Studio. You can call it anything you want. Don't worry about that. Networking is really important. You need to go to your default VPC. So I know my default VPC is BA5. You can find this out by going to VPC on the top. I'm going to right-hand click and just open this in a separate window just so we can have a look. Give it a little second, then left-hand side, your VPCs, and then if you look at your VPCs, you can go to the right-hand side and you will be able to tell what one is your default, usually by the name. So you can see that I have these other ones that I've created for certain things. And if I go over to the right, you can see that this one here is marked as the default VPC by yes in the column. So that's how you know. And that one is my default VPC BA5. Back into the EMR console, you want to choose your subnet. So just choose 3 of them. That's all we need for now. Default security group access, enable cluster/get endpoints. That is correct. We're going to go in through AWS IAM. That's fine. Service role, right-hand click, and then look for the role that we just created. So EMR notebook role is the one that we created during the setup work. And then the storage space is the bucket that we created. So if I click in there, type in EMR, you'll see that Johnny Chivers EMR is there. Your bucket will also be there. So just a reminder of what we did. We have give the studio notebook a name. We have found our default VPC. We have selected 3 subnets. We have gone to the default security group. We've enabled clusters and endpoints. We're using IAM as access management, and then service role is the role we created during the setup phase, and then the storage space is the bucket that we created during the setup phase as well. So quite a bit there to configure. If you're slightly lost on the screen, the document has all this with screenshots as well. So you can follow along there or follow along with me on the video. Back into the console, and you want to hit Create Studio. This will take a few seconds, sometimes not even. You want to minimize that, and then on the right-hand side, you have your access URL. So click right-hand side, access URL. It takes a couple of seconds to sign you in using your IAM role that you've been using this entire time. And we are in. Then what we want to do is actually create a app for serverless. So you can see down the left-hand side on here, there's create application, or you can go applications on the left-hand side under serverless and then create application up here on the right. These are 2 ones that I was messing around with before we started, so just ignore them. That's how I learned how to do these tutorials, and I'm going to create a brand new application. This one is going to be my Spark serverless, so I'm just going to call it Spark serverless. You want it to be Spark, you want it to be in EMR 6, you want the default settings, we don't need to worry about any of that, and create the application. So this is creating a serverless Spark application that we can use to run Spark on EMR. We then want to click into it by the name, so I just went left-hand side there, click in by name, and this is where we can actually now send jobs at our Spark serverless EMR service. So we're actually just about to fire a Spark job at EMR. We want to then go submit a job down the right-hand side here on the right. You want to give the job a name. So this is Spark, and I'm going to call this word count because this job will be counting words using some pre-built code that AWS gave for us. Inside here, you should have that execution role that we set up at the beginning when we were doing the initial work. Script location, well, we uploaded it to the bucket that we created, and we uploaded the script we need. So EMR, Johnny Chivers EMR, scripts, and then it's the .py file, word count.py file that we need. There's no script arguments that we need really. There's no job arguments that we need or Spark properties or anything like that. We can literally just go submit job. That'll start the job running. So I'm just going to hit X at the top there. This is the word count off and running. This will take about 2.5 minutes to complete in my experience, sometimes 3. What it's doing is going out to an S3 bucket that's public, owned by AWS, pulling down a load of words from a file, and then counting those words using Spark. So if you follow this along, you'll see it go to pending and a couple of other phases until it completes. So I'm going to pause the video here and then pick it up once this has completed successfully. Okay, so it took 4 minutes, and as you can see, that job successfully completed. So it ran the Spark application for us successfully. Now, to do a Hive application, it's a total different setup of an app. So we need to go back out to applications, and then we want to run a new application by hitting create application. And I'm just going to call this one Hive serverless. And this time our type is Hive 6.6660 and create the application. So you have to create one for Hive, one for Spark. They're 2 separate applications. And I think that's kind of important to bear in mind. Then we click into Hive serverless, and again, we want to submit a job. So we need a name for this job, so I'm just going to call this Hive job Let's get rid of this nonsense here. So Hive job, then select the serverless role, and then the script location is browse S3, EMR, Johnny Chivers EMR, scripts, and then the .SQL one. Hit choose. Edit in JSON is what we need to do for job configuration. If you go back out into EMR Serverless and you go to Hive config and then copy this, so the little green tick, go back into the EMR Studio, paste it in, then change the S3 location here to the bucket location that you've been using and creating the entire time. So I'm Johnny-Chivers-EMR, and then remove this as well and go for the same again. So it's Johnny-Chivers-EMR. Okay, that's cool. And then submit the job. This will take a couple of minutes. Just a word of warning, couple failed on me because I didn't select the right script location there. So this will take about 2 minutes to 4 minutes to run. Keep hitting refresh, and eventually this will go through the stages and then end up complete. Okay, you can see that that ran successfully. So what we can do now, we can actually go look at that table. So I'm just going to jump back out onto the main console page and go to Glue by typing in Glue. Clicking on Glue. Then if we go to databases on the left-hand side once it loads, and we look at EMR DB, that's what we actually created in that script. So if I go quickly to the script, you'll see that we created a database called EMR DB, and then we created a customer table in that database. So EMR DB right there, click into it, go tables in EMR DB, there's the customer table. So if we look at customers, we've actually created a customer table. Now, as a bit of a bonus, we can go to Athena, hit into Athena. If you've never been into Athena before, I am in my primary work group over here. So you'll come in, you'll end up in Athena. You may have to configure a work group. If you need to create a work group, go create, and we'll call this one tutorial. Then I want to select the location of my S3 bucket again, and EMR, Johnny Chivers EMR, and then query results, and hit choose. Bucket owner doesn't really matter. Leave everything else as default and hit create work group. Then I want to go back out to query editor. I want to select that work group that we just created called tutorial. You want your AWS data catalog, you want EMR, and you want this customer table, and you want to hit the 3 little dots and then go up to preview table, limit to 10, and you can see that we have successfully created a table over the data that we uploaded right back at the start of the setup work. And we've also created a database called EMR DB where the customer table actually sits itself. So that's everything for the tutorial. Just make sure you go back into the studio, cancel all these applications and shut them down. So you can just do that by anything that has start, hitting stop, funny enough, and then hit confirm. And then you might want to delete that S3 bucket as well. Okay guys, congratulations. That's the end of the tutorial and the video. You went in and you spun up a Spark and a Hive job. Again, make sure you check out those resources below, including that AWS video. It's really good. With that being said, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe so I can continue to make this free content. Please check out my website as well, www.johnnychivers.co.uk. And until next time guys, thanks for watching.